This week in Linux, we have a jam-packed episode for you. The KDE team have released a brand new version of the Plasma desktop. We're also going to be talking about some big changes that are coming to Arch Linux and the pen testing distro Kali Linux. Plus, we've got a trifecta of great news from Valve. This week, they released some information about Steam and Proton, and it's bound to be exciting for Linux gamers. Then we're going to be checking out a major update to the OpenMoonRay renderer from the DreamWorks Animation team. Yes, that DreamWorks. All of this and more on This Week in Linux, the weekly news show that keeps you up to date with what's going on in the Linux and open source world. Now let's jump right into your source for Linux GNews. This episode of Twill is sponsored by Sandfly Security. More on them later. The KDE team have announced the latest version of the Plasma desktop with Plasma 6.4. This release brings per desktop tiling, a souped-up spectacle, color-savvy KRunner, numpad-driven pointer control, a deeper shade for Breeze Dark, smarter notifications, a HDR calibration wizard, and bulked-up system monitor, turning your Linux desktop from a reliable sedan to a finely tuned track car ready to hug every curve of your workflow. The feature that steals the show for me is the per desktop tiling. So you can basically control your tile layout per desktop rather than just being a traditional style of having it just a single layout. You can now assign a different tile layout to every single virtual desktop. So you can mix half and half on one, a 2x2 grid on another, or float apps wherever you want, or do anything else you want to do. Whatever suits your workflow, this gives you the ability to do that, which is awesome. I like the idea of having this kind of zone system for the tiling and to be able to control it per desktop. Very cool. Spectacle screenshots just got a big overhaul. So now when you press the print screen button, it will give you an option right into being able to create a region selection, and it will also show you the ability to annotate stuff. You used to have to click a button to open the annotations, but now you can quickly add arrows, add text, add a blur effect, and all sorts of stuff through the new Spectacle, and it's just really nice. I think this new version of Spectacle is solid, especially with like the quick magnifier functionality and all this other stuff. It is a very good update, so I'm excited to play with it. We also got some improvements to KRunner, so if you put in the name of a color like Papaya Whip, I don't know what color that is, but it apparently is a color that you can get in CSS, or you use a hex code that you get from like basically a color picker and that sort of thing. You can then paste it into KRunner and it will show you like a small dot comparison of what that color is. Plus it also gives you alt codes. So if you give it a name of a color, it will also give you the hex code for it, which is very cool. So you don't have to hunt for the palette information anymore. You can just put it right into KRunner. We also got some accessibility boost in the latest version of the Plasma desktop because now on Wayland you can steer the pointer with the numpad. So your mouse cursor, you can move it around with your arrow keys on the numpad, which is very cool. Or you can use the three-finger pinch effect to do zooming, which is very nice too. So they're working on, they say, an endless effort to get improvements on accessibility, but they are doing improvements with every new release, and this is clear that's true. They've also done some improvements for the screen reader cues as well, so that's really cool. Breeze Dark is now slightly darker, and the rest of the desktop now fades with a effect, kind of like a dark shadow effect, when you have an authentication dialog pop-up happen. So like a password box would now be very hard to miss. It sometimes could get out of the way, and for example, sometimes you would have it pop up and then click somewhere else and then have to find where that window was because it's not going to be typically in the taskbar, and now this kind of just pulls more attention directly to it, which is really nice. There's also a lot of improvements to the notification system. So now transfers will show live speed graphs. And also when you hit a full screen, Plasma will mute non-urgent pings, kind of like a do not disturb, but when it goes into full screen, like if you're playing a game, it will put it into do not disturb mode automatically. And then when you come back out of the full screen, it will then reactivate the notifications and give you like a summary of what you missed, which is a very cool idea. We also got some updates to the widgets in Plasma. For those who don't know, the widgets are small programs that carry out specific tasks on your desktop. The application launcher widget, for example, will now have a new green new tag next to a newly installed application in the menu. So you can easily find where something you just installed lives in the menu. The tag disappears after about 3 days or after the first time you run the app. So that's a really nice touch. But another one that's really cool is the disk and devices widget. Now you can use this to access internal and removable disks, but you can also do it for fixes. So it will check and even offer repairs for your disks if it finds them, which is very cool. Tablet users get an easier stylus button mapping, a one-click calibration reset, and an optional behave like a mouse function. And that is very cool. So if you use KDE Plasma on a tablet, this is going to be very nice for you for sure. There's a new wizard that tunes the HDR and extended dynamic range. So Plasma now supports the P010 video color format for power-friendly HDR playback, as well as many more things. So this is really nice to see the effort being put into HDR support, because a lot of people are excited for what is going to come with HDR, because even Windows doesn't have really great HDR support yet. So it's really cool to see that Plasma is getting some more. There's also some upgrades to the System Insight or System Monitor information. So Intel and AMD GPU stats are now displayed. A background services resource group and raw sensor readouts land in the System Monitor, while the free Space Checker scans all partitions, so you get all this information in the new System Monitor. There's also a raft of fresh Wayland protocols. Signal Pixel Buffer, Idle Notify, and more are boosting app compatibility and many other improvements in compatibility with Wayland. So if you are a KDE Plasma user, you're definitely going to want to check out Plasma 6.4, although you may have to wait depending on your distribution. Some of them take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. So if you're using a static release / stable release, then you might need to wait a few months to get the update. Or if you're using a rolling release, you might wait a couple days or even a couple weeks, depending on the distribution, how fast they are to get it. If you want to play with it now, you can check out KDE Neon. It isn't available when I checked it just a couple days ago. It wasn't available to download the ISO with 6.4 and then play with it, but you could get the 6.3 ISO and then upgrade that one to 6.4, and you'd still be able to play with it. But that's more or less like an enthusiast playground style of distribution. I wouldn't necessarily recommend Neon as like a standard distribution to use, though it is really nice to have something to play around with the latest release of Plasma when it does come out. So if you want to play with it now, go check out Neon. And if you want to wait for your distribution, it might be a few days to a few months, depending on what distribution you're using. Fingers crossed for it being faster. Arch Linux just uncorked its wine bottle to switch to WoW 64. What does that mean? Well, Arch Linux is repackaging wine and wine staging as pure WoW 64 builds, scrapping the multi-lib dependency and bundling everything needed to run 32-bit Windows apps on a 64-bit kernel. So why this? Why is it happening? Well, upstream Wine's WoW 64 this is now mature as what they think. So they're going to be rolling it out in production. So Arch is kind of basically, dropping the extra stack of 32-bit system libraries. So that means there's fewer build steps, fewer mirrors to sync, and also fewer issues of not being able to find lib32-whatever SO files. So that's going to be nice. Also, there's a quick heads up for gamers and people who use legacy apps. Arch is giving a warning about potential issues that OpenGL performance, which is a known limitation of the new WoW 64 mode, is reducing performance for 32-bit applications that use OpenGL directly. Now, you may have to do some extra stuff in order to fix some breaking changes. So there's a possibility that you need to recreate the existing 32-bit prefixes in your system. So that could be also even requiring a reinstallation of some apps or games that are affected, because otherwise you may have some missing DLL errors pop up. But this is not that difficult to do. It's just like a small one command, but it is kind of specific to your system. For those unfamiliar, you might be wondering, what is WoW 64 anyway? Well, it means Windows on Windows 64-bit. So basically, back in the day when Microsoft decided to switch Windows to 64-bit, they broke a ton of 32-bit programs. Microsoft decided that in order to preserve backwards compatibility, they would run a translation layer that runs 32-bit programs in like a 32-bit mode on a 64-bit machine, calling into Windows API using the 32-bit style, aka the Windows that is on Windows 64. So WoW64 would then take those calls, translate them to 64-bit, and, do its thing. And then translate the response back to 32-bit so the 32-bit program doesn't know it's even running on a 64-bit system. For a long time, Wine has had two versions, a 32-bit version and a 64-bit version. If you ran a 32-bit app, you used the 32-bit Wine stack, and a 64-bit app used the 64-bit stack. This is not how Windows works, and that causes some issues and bugs. Wine wants to be as compatible with Windows as possible, so they implemented WoW64 and is in the process of deploying it. Basically, a 64-bit Wine process hosts a 32-bit lightweight environment, so Windows apps still believe they're on a 32-bit OS, but no multi-lib scaffolding required. Kali Linux just sharpened its claws. Now even your smartwatch can throw Wi-Fi punches. This offensive security platform for penetration testing just got even better. Kali Linux 2025.2 has been released. This is the second quarterly release of the year. It rolls out with a refreshed tool menu, GNOME 48, Plasma 6.3, Bloodhound Community Edition, 13 new tools, and kernel 6.12 across the board. The Kali menu now mirrors the MITRE attack matrix. No more playing hide and seek for recon versus privilege escalation tools. Also, plus YAML-driven automation has been added for faster future tweaks to the menu. So this is going to be a lot easier to find different tools because they're categorized in a way that is expected for pen testers. This release adds GNOME 48, and it gets HDR support, triple buffering support, a VPN IP indicator, and the new Papers document reader. You can find more information in the episode we covered the GNOME 48 release on Twill. I'll have that linked in the show notes. As for KDE Plasma, they have Plasma 6.3, which improves fractional scaling, adds nightlight color accuracy, and also richer info center stats. It doesn't have 6.4, which just came out, but it does have 6.3. So if you would like to know what happened in 6.3, I'll have a link to that episode of Twill as well. Now, if you're a member of the Bloodhound gang and you are a hunter for Active Directory stuff, you get a major upgrade with the Bloodhound Community Edition. It comes with Azure Hound, Sharp Hound, Bloodhound CE, Python, and more, bringing smoother UI and bigger graphs out of the box. And like I mentioned in the intro, there's a new set of tools. There's every new release, there's always some new tools added to Kali Linux, which is really cool. They have 13 this time. So for example, they have Firmware Slicer, Binwalk 3, Git Reconnaissance Tool, Git X-Ray, CRL Fuzz, Legalo NG, and 9 more newcomers join the repositories. Now let's talk about NetHunter on your watch, because why not? The first ever smartwatch gets injection and handshake capture. So now Kali Linux NetHunter on the TicWatch Pro 3 supports wireless injection, deauthentication, and able to capture WPA2 handshakes. And for more NetHunter stuff, we have car hacking suite Can Arsenal has been rebranded as Carsenal, which, by the way, fantastic. Much better name. I love this. Carsenal. And also they added new tools like simulators and Venn decode to the features. And they've also added support for more devices like the Redmi 4 and the Galaxy S10. They also have some improvements and tweaks to the ARM support and the single board computer stuff. So the Raspberry Pi 5 has folded into the unified 64-bit image. They've also made some improvements to the Pi boards now getting 6.12 kernel. Also, they've made some improvements for a fresh bootloader on the USB Armory Mark II, as well as many more. They also added a clipboard manager, well, more clipboard system, which is Xclip, which is pre-installed for clipboard piping. So you can basically take stuff from your clipboard and then run it through various different commands with Xclip. So if you ever wanted to get into offensive security, then you might want to check out the latest release of Kali Linux. Although it's important to note that Kali is not meant to be a daily driver, so don't run it on your Azure Sol Linux distro. Kali Linux is very cool and very powerful, but it's meant to break into things, not keep things out of your machine. So keep that in mind. On the other hand, there is something designed to keep your system secure, and that's Sandfly Security. Security is non-negotiable, and with threats getting smarter, you need to have your tools keeping up without dragging your system down. Traditional agents, they slow you down, they leave blind spots. It's time for a smarter approach. That's why This Week in Linux is proud to be sponsored by Sandfly Security, the revolutionary agentless platform designed for Linux. Sandfly doesn't just detect and respond. It revolutionizes security with SSH key tracking, password auditing, and drift detection, covering threats from every angle. Whether your systems are in the cloud, on premises, or in embedded devices, Sandfly ensures they're all secure without the headaches of agent-based solutions. If your company is interested in transforming your security strategy, Sandfly also offers free trials to show off what it can do for your business. So go to thisweekinlinux.com/Sandfly to check out the free trials. Also, listen to what Celinda Lakamgi of Tate Communications has to say. Sandfly addresses a serious security gap in the industry. Intrusion detection on Linux platforms. The best part of Sandfly is its agentless nature, making it a versatile application for any Linux environment. So experience security that's not just effective, but gives you peace of mind. No agents, no downtime, just cutting-edge protection. Dive into the future of Linux security at thisweekinlinux.com/Sandfly. That's thisweekinlinux.com/SANDFLY. And see how Sandfly can transform your security strategy. Also, if you're as fascinated by cybersecurity as much as I am, then go check out the interview we had on Destination Linux with the CEO of Sandfly, who has an awesome story about how he got into Linux, how he got into security, and even DEF CON was covered in the episode. So check out destinationlinux.net/409 for that interview. Plus, if you want to save some money on the Home Edition, there's a Destination 50 discount code to get you 50% off the Home Edition. So go to thisweekinlinux.com/Sandfly to get started. Valve just pulled a gaming hat trick. They flipped the switch on Proton, they cranked up the stats overlay, and they've also scored 20,000 Steam Deck ready titles. All of this in a single week. Okay, technically the 20,000 Steam Deck titles took a long time, but it hit 20,000 this week, so let's count it. Let's talk about that milestone first, actually. So 20,000 games are now marked as playable or verified for the Steam Deck, which is just awesome. So up from 19,000 in May and 18,000 in March. So it's kind of like the proof that the catalog is snowballing, not trickling. It's getting better and better. And that makes Linux gaming get better and better. The next thing is probably the most important thing because it is going to help a lot of people who are just getting started with Linux gaming not have to deal with any headaches. And that is Proton is now always on. The latest Steam beta removes the need to check the box labeled enable for other titles. Obviously, it's still the beta, so you still have to opt into the beta, but eventually it's going to be for everyone. But the fact that they're doing this is a big deal. So it's basically making it so Proton is available out of the box for every Windows game. You can still choose which version of the Proton compatibility you want to use, but you don't have to turn it on for all titles anymore. All you got to do is just start playing the game, which is great because, native Linux builds will still launch first, by the way, but they won't have like a requirement to say if someone posts a thing on Reddit or whatever saying, why can't I get my game installed? Why won't it run? It's just, it's one less hurdle for newcomers to Linux and Steam Deck gamers, and that's awesome. There's also some improvements to the performance monitor HUD or heads-up display. The humble FPS counter is graduating to a Steam Deck style overlay with CPU, GPU, RAM, and frame time graphs. Now, the desktop Linux currently, we're not getting everything yet. Only the FPS graph while Valve irons out all the cross-platform metrics. But full support is planned. But until then, Mango HUD still fills the gap for those who are wanting something more robust. But if you want to try out the new one, you can just toggle in the settings on the in-game options, and then after you've opted into the beta client, of course. Now, some of you might be wondering, why is Linux gaming that big of a deal? Why does it really even matter? And I think it matters to people who don't play games, because improvements to the platform for gamers benefits everyone. And also, there are more gamers that there are on the platform. That means more people on the platform, and therefore more incentive for companies to create stuff for Linux that's going to benefit people who play games and people who don't. So that's why gaming on Linux is so important. So yes, thanks Valve for being awesome. DreamWorks Animation. Yes, that DreamWorks has announced the latest release of OpenMoonRay, their open source, multi-award winning, state-of-the-art production MCRT renderer, which has been used on feature films such as The Wild Robot, Kung Fu Panda 4, How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World, and more. This release just added support for many things, including NUMA. MoonRay 2.15.0.1 is the biggest jump since the open source debut of the MoonRay renderer. New versioning syncs public and studio builds, so now every major bump aligns with the version a feature film locks for production. So once they've decided that they're locked on this particular version of the MoonRay or OpenMoonRay, that is when they make new releases. And the first thing to talk about with this release is performance. NUMA awareness is now baked in. For those who are not familiar, well, basically NUMA is kind of like an engine that keeps threads and memories on the same socket, slashing cross-node latency on multi-GPU rigs, and through the early testing, they've seen that it is 30% faster. Which this means that this release is certainly going to have you say, yep, that happened. This release also adds the RATS test suite. So this is the new render acceptance test suite. It's testing for auto renders of about 400 canonical shots, difference checkers, even on the pixel level. And it also shouts at you if a commit bends the light wrong. So it basically tells you if anything goes wrong. It's like automating the process of hunting for regressions. There's also a new GUI generator, which turns any RDLA file into on-the-fly sliders. And if you make a tweak on the reflectivity value, you can watch MoonRay update mid-frame, no recompile needed. Also, there's the new two-sided map for front-back textures, UDIM-aware rotation, multiple BSS RDFs per shader, a field of view knob on the fisheye camera, plus per BSDF lobe light sets for surgical rim hits, and many, many more updates in this latest release of OpenMoonRay. So if you want some more information on OpenMoonRay, you could check the show notes for links, or you could check the show notes for the link to the Destination Linux episode where I interviewed Randy Packer of DreamWorks Animation. That's destinationlinux.net/352. It was a fascinating interview. Be sure to check it out if you are remotely interested in animation, DreamWorks, just open source software rendering. It's very, very cool. Go check it out. destinationlinux.net/352. The Open Invention network just blew out 20 candles, and every one of those flames snuffed out a patent threat. That's an anniversary of 20th anniversary for the OIN. So it was founded in 2005. The OIN is marking its 20th anniversary as the world's largest patent non-aggression community for Linux and open source. The members' rank have ballooned to more than 4,000 organizations. Just check it. We're going to scroll this for this part of the segment and just see how many things are on there, how many organizations are part of this. It's been up to 42% on average each year since the launch in 2005. Also, together the OIN participants control 3 million or more, like over 3 million patents and applications, all cross-license royalty-free inside the group. Its Linux system definition now shields over 4,500 core packages from the kernel to user space stacks. Now, you might be wondering, why should you care? Well, the blanket license means developers, distros, and enterprises can ship Linux without budgeting for courtroom drama. Patent assertion entities lose their leverage the instant a target joins the club. So this is a really good thing to be able to participate and come to as a collective to avoid all the nonsense of software patents and that sort of thing. Going beyond the license, OIN files prior art challenges, funds re-exams, and bankrolls open source legal initiatives to neutralize bad patents before they bite. Think of the OIN as like a IP Geneva Convention. Join once, pledge not to sue over the protected stack, and gain instant royalty-free access to every other member's covered patents. It's a pretty good deal, I'd say. The SDL project, or the Simple Direct Media Layer project, has just learned a party trick. Now it can teleport your cursor on Wayland without needing X involved at all, which is really nice. And for those who don't know, the SDL is a very important project. It is very vital for a lot of things. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But first, let's talk about what is landing in the latest versions of SDL, or what's coming up in SDL. So pointer warp is now landing in SDL. So a fresh merge to SDL's main branch adds support for Wayland's new pointer warp protocol, letting games recenter the mouse or fling it across the screen natively. Now, why does this matter? Well, this is very important for first-person shooter games because warp is how titles reset your aim after every frame. Without it, native Wayland ports had to lock/unlock the pointer, which is kind of an ugly way to do it. And also, they had another option of falling back to X Wayland, which causes lag. And now the relative camera games can run pure Wayland with zero hacks, making it much more performant and efficient. This feature arrives with Wayland Protocols 1.45, which was released last week. And almost immediately after the Wayland Protocols 1.45 release, with this staging protocol in place, SDL merged support for this Wayland pointer warp support, which is fantastic because it's so quick, and the SDL is such an impressive project. So what do you need to do? As a developer, you update the next SDL snapshot or nightly and depend on Wayland Protocols 1.45 plus, and then delete the X11 fallback. Or users, not anything really. You don't need to touch any configs or anything because the warp calls is handled automatically by your compositor if it supports it. This is clearly something exciting for gamers because they can expect smoother camera swings, less or maybe even no cursor drift, and many more benefits. But for those who are curious, you're probably wondering, what is SDL, right? For those unfamiliar, SDL is like the silent workhorse, the Swiss Army knife for Linux, having low-level audio, video, input, and window management. Born to make early Linux games ports possible, it now underpins basically everything, like almost everything from Valve's Steam Deck to Python's Pygame, acting as the glue that lets developers target Linux, Windows, macOS, phones, web browsers, and even cars with one codebase. In short, if you've ever run a game, an emulator, or even a multimedia app on Linux, SDL is probably doing a lot of the heavy lifting behind the scenes. Essentially, it's a cross-platform hardware abstraction. It's a C library that hides the differences between X11, Wayland, Direct3D, Vulkan, Metal, even ALSA and Pulse Audio, and HID, and more. So developers write once and run everywhere. It was created in 1998 by Sam Lentinga. I think I said that right. Maybe I didn't. Sorry if I didn't. While porting Doom to non-Windows platforms. Its first real outing was Loki Software's wave of Linux native ports back in the day. And also now Sam works with Valve, so that explains a lot of things improving in Valve. So SDL supports Raspberry Pi, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, Haiku, and even WebAssembly, proving Linux-centric code can scale everywhere, because it's basically everywhere. And also recent commits have added Steam Deck-specific HID drivers, so games built with SDL automatically understand the deck's gyro effects and also the back buttons. Also, it has a lot of impact on other technology because it's basically a cross-platform enabler for Unity, Godot, RetroArch, and also many in-house engines piggyback on SDL, shrinking porting costs and de-risking Linux support, which is awesome. And also the SDL3 had a big release back in January 2025, shipping a bunch of cleanups, a modern GPU API, compatibility with layers for SDL2 compatible, SDL1.2 as well, and also many, many more improvements. You can check out the episode I covered on TWIL 295 for the full details of SDL3. Basically, without SDL, Linux gaming would look drastically different. A lot of things would look drastically different if we didn't have SDL. It's kind of ironic because a lot of people don't even know that much about SDL or even that it exists in the first place because it just does its job so well. It sits in the background. You don't notice it doing anything because it's doing such important stuff, but it's also doing it so well you don't see the issues you don't see issues, so you don't know about it and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to take a moment to say Thanks to Sam and everybody at the STL team because it is a very important project, and thank you very much for making it. Thanks for watching this episode of This Week in Linux. If you like what I do here on this show and want to be kept up to date with what's going on in the Linux and open source world, then be sure to subscribe. And of course, remember to like that smash button. If you'd like to support the show and the Tux Digital Network, then consider becoming a patron by going to tuxdigital.com/membership, where you get a bunch of cool perks like access to the patron-only section of our Discord server and much, much more, including access to the patron-only post show that happens every week after the live show recording of this show on the stream. You can also support the show by ordering the Linux is Everywhere t-shirt or the This Week in Linux shirt at tuxdigital.com/store. Plus, while you're there, check out all the other cool stuff we have like hats, mugs, hoodies, and more at tuxdigital.com/store. I'll see you next time for another episode of your source for Linux GNews. Thanks again for watching. I'm Michael Tennell. I hope you're doing swell. Be sure to ring that notification bell, and until next time, I bid you farewell.